Why the hell is the CEO's espresso machine hissing like Satan's humidifier again? I muttered, crawling behind the server rack with a flashlight in my mouth and a 2-day-old banana in my pocket. That damn machine was wired into the same breaker as the HVAC for the East Wing, something I only found out after the great latte-induced power outage of 2011. Nobody ever documented that. Of course, nobody but me ever documented anything around here, but I knew because I remembered everything. That morning had started like every other for the last 21 years. Me, Miranda Jean Harkins, unlocking the office door at 6:47 a.m., 23 minutes before official open, with the original brass key they gave me in 2002. I'd oil it twice a year. You'd be surprised how many executives can't turn a key if the lock squeaks. Assume it's broken, like they're common sense. The cleaning crew had left gum in the sink again. Someone from product accidentally left sushi in the mini fridge over the weekend. The kombucha exploded. Not my job technically, not in any contract. But guess who scraped seaweed off a smart fridge with a laminated calendar and a plastic spatula? This gal. Some days I felt like the human version of duct tape. I held everything together in total silence. Got used exactly the same way, only noticed when something broke. The CEO thought I was still reception, even though my business card said facilities and ops manager. And my inbox had 3,200 unread urgent emails from people who couldn't change a toner cartridge to save their crypt-like lives. It got worse when they brought in that new HR director, Haley, fresh out of grad school, all teeth and trends. She once asked me where the Ethernet plug went. I told her, in the wall, sweetheart, same place your job performance is headed. She didn't laugh. Now, I ain't no TikTok guru, but apparently 97% of folks listening to these stories don't subscribe. That's like showing up to a potluck empty-handed and still going home with Tupperware. So, go on, hit that subscribe button. Keeps the lights on and the petty revenge flowing. Back to the mess. I didn't go to fancy colleges, didn't wear blazers that cost more than my truck, but I knew that building. Not like a property manager knows it. No, I knew it like you know an old dog. Which pipes moaned when it was going to rain? Which thermostat freaked out when the humidity hit 70%? Where the fuse box creaked like a haunted dollhouse if you opened it too fast? I'd kept that company breathing through power surges, toilet floods, and 3 CEOs worth of poor decisions, and they just forgot. No recognition, no bonus, no handwritten notes from the board. Just once, when I stayed late to personally unclog the women's restroom after someone dropped a badge in it, don't ask. The old VP of Finance gave me a half-eaten protein bar and said, "You're a saint, Marcy." My name is Miranda. At some point, I stopped correcting them. I wasn't trying to be the hero. I just believed in doing things right. That lease, the one that let us squat in prime downtown real estate for 1/10 of the current market rate, I negotiated that back when we couldn't even get a landlord to return a call. The company had 5 employees and a fax machine held together with chewing gum. The founder, Randy, sat across from me at Denny's and said, "Miranda, if you don't co-sign, we'll be working out of my garage. My wife will kill me." I didn't co-sign. I signed the whole damn thing myself, just until we got on our feet. He said we never had that conversation again, because after that, it was always me who renewed the lease. Me who dealt with the property manager. Me who coordinated the HVAC installs, the carpet replacement, the weird smell in Suite B that turned out to be a dead squirrel inside the insulation. They never took my name off the lease, never even asked. I sat at my kitchen table, cracked open a Diet Dr. Pepper, and started reading, like my dignity was buried somewhere in that fine print. Page 12, Section 9-B. Renewal of lease term shall require written notice from the lessee no later than 30 days prior to expiration. I blinked. Read it again? Then I checked the expiration date, August 1st. Today was August 3rd, 2 days too late. They hadn't renewed, hadn't even emailed. Not a peep from legal, not a word from Haley, not a single panic call about zoning or rental terms. They were so busy patting each other on the back and playing musical chairs with titles that they missed the most important deadline in the company's physical existence. I sat back in my chair. A long, slow grin crawled across my face. The kind of smile you wear when you realize the universe just handed you the keys to the kingdom. It wasn't just that they fired me. It was how they fired me, like a smudge on a window, like I was just some disposable middle-aged woman with a binder full of obsolete trivia. But see, my trivia ran the damn building. They forgot I was still the lessee, the legal tenant, and now they were squatters with espresso machines. I picked up my phone and started scrolling. Insurance policy still in my name. HVAC contract renewed last year under my direct email. Cleaning services only showed up because I Venmo'd the manager once a month under Building Freshness Fund. Utilities routed through a business account I opened with the city in 2005. Back when the power cut out every time someone used the microwave and the printer at the same time, everything that mattered still ran through me. I could warn them. I could send an email, forward the lease terms with a subject line like, "Hey, forgot something." That's not what they would have done if the shoe was on the other foot. No. If the shoe was on the other foot, they'd be halfway through replacing me with a younger model who doesn't know how to reset the circuit panel without Googling it. So I closed the lease folder. I poured another Dr. Pepper. And I decided, for the first time in 2 decades, to shut the hell up. Let them feel the silence. Let them find the edge when they walk off it. Let the espresso machine be their first clue, because now they were trespassing, and I had the paperwork to prove it. I wore my church shoes to the meeting with the property manager, not because I needed to look fancy, but because they made a louder noise when I walked across marble floors. I wanted the world to hear me coming. Thomas, the property manager, looked up from his monitor when I walked into his office on the 4th floor. He was the kind of man who always smelled like copper toner and had 17 different highlighters on his desk for no goddamn reason. "Miranda," he said, surprised. "Didn't think I'd see you back here." I smiled. "Let's just say I'm here in a legacy capacity." He tilted his head like a confused golden retriever. I sat down, pulled out my folder, and handed him the lease packet. Original amendments, all still pristine. Right down to the one sticky note where the founder doodled a flying burrito during our 2009 renewal meeting. "I want to confirm something," I said. "There was no written renewal request submitted by July 1st, correct?" He blinked, started clicking away at his keyboard like it owed him money. No, not from the company. Nothing logged in the system." I assumed they were going month to month while they worked out a new deal. We hadn't heard anything official. I nodded, calm as a tombstone. "Good. That tracks, because under Clause 9B, it converts to month-to-month tenancy if no notice is received." Thomas leaned back, his chair creaked like an old knee. "Technically, yeah, that's correct." I pulled another paper from my bag, slow and deliberate. It was crisp, thick stock, gold-embossed letterhead. "I'd like to formally notify you of a lease termination, effective in 30 days. His eyebrows shot up so high I thought they'd file for workers' comp. "Wait, you're terminating it?" "Yep, as the lessee of record, they missed the renewal window, and I've already lined up a replacement tenant." He swallowed hard. "Do they know they will?" The new tenant was a wellness startup called Bloom Pulse, all green juice and artisanal air purifiers. Young, loaded with investor money, and desperate for downtown footage to install their Himalayan salt wall and, combat taps. I'd met the founder at a farmer's market last year while buying beets. She'd offered 3 times what the current lease was worth. Thomas ran a hand through his thinning hair. "This is going to be messy." "Messy," I said, standing, "is what they gave me after 2 decades of loyalty." I left before he could ask more questions. Back home, I opened a fresh legal document on my laptop and filled in the blanks. Plaintiff, Miranda Jean Harkins. Defendant, current occupant, Suite 201 to 221. Reason for eviction, failure to renew lease, material breach, and subletting without notification. I'd found out they'd rented a back office to some crypto consultant without ever telling me. Another little oversight. I filed it online through the county portal, paid extra to expedite. The confirmation email hit my inbox with a delightful ding that made me feel younger than Bachelorette contestants ever could. Then, like clockwork, HR emailed me. Subject: request confirmation of returned property. Dear Miranda, hope you're doing well. We're reaching out to confirm you've returned all company property, including documentation, keys, badges, and other physical or digital assets belonging to company name. Please respond to confirm completion. Best, Haley. I didn't hesitate. I clicked reply all because I knew Haley liked to CC half the damn company to make herself look busy. My response? Yes, including the ones you forgot I had. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. The building meant something to me once. I'd seen it grow from drywall and Ethernet spaghetti into something shiny and polished. I'd eaten more lunches at that front desk than in my own kitchen, laughed with interns, cried when I lost my dog, and someone left me flowers on the break room table. But love has limits, and mine ran out 2 days after they slid that folder across the table. I wasn't just getting even. I was reclaiming everything. 2 mornings later, I stood in my sunroom, watering my peace lily with one hand and holding the certified letter in the other. Heavy envelope, real ink signature, stamped with county court markings and everything. Plaintiff, Miranda Jean Harkins. Defendant, company name at occupant suite 201 to 221. Subject: Notice of termination and demand to vacate premises. My name in bold right at the top. It felt surreal, like seeing your own obituary while sipping coffee, except instead of death, it was resurrection. A resurrection in sweatpants and orthopedic slippers, but still, across town, the same envelope landed in reception around 9:13 a.m. The property manager sent it priority mail and emailed a copy just to be sure. Standard procedure, 30-day notice. Tenant has failed to renew. New occupancy scheduled. Kindly vacate or respond through legal channels. Problem was, the receptionist that day was a temp. Name tag said Amber in pink glitter pen. Probably thought it was spam. She chucked it in the recycling bin between a box of expired Kind bars and a broken laminator. Meanwhile, upstairs in the executive lounge, the leadership team was busy spit-shining their egos. IPO talks, branding refreshes. One of them was giving a presentation about disrupting verticals, whatever the hell that meant. I'd seen the slide deck on LinkedIn later. It had a stock photo of a woman laughing while eating salad and pointing at a whiteboard. Groundbreaking stuff. They were too busy swimming in their own ambition soup to notice the tide pulling out. I sat on my couch rereading the notice, not because I doubted the legality. Lenny made sure it was airtight. I just needed to feel it, the weight, the consequence. This wasn't just some HR slap fight anymore. This was a time bomb wrapped in bureaucracy and tied with a red tape bow. And I'd lit the fuse. There was a moment, maybe 20 seconds, where guilt tried to wiggle its way in. That building had been my second home. I'd bandaged its cracks, soothed its moans, kept it warm and humming. I'd seen weddings announced in that office. Babies born, affairs bloom and implode with equal force. It meant something once, but now it was just a box full of people who thought legacy meant slow. So I folded the notice back into the envelope and slid it into my filing cabinet, right behind my divorce papers and 2 unpaid parking tickets I was saving for sport. That's when my phone buzzed. Dan, facilities guy. Hey, you okay? Something's weird around here. Front desk got a court notice, but nobody's talking. Place feels off. Dan was one of the good ones. Quiet guy. Knew how to replace a fluorescent ballast without whining about it. Once helped me chase a possum out of the break room ceiling tiles. I almost replied with, "I'm fine." That felt dishonest. So I sent, "I'm more than okay, Dan. I'm just finally being seen." He didn't reply right away, probably still digesting whatever gossip was brewing. I imagined the confusion, the execs assuming the letter was a mistake or a prank, or maybe they'd blame a vendor. They were good at that, outsourcing accountability like it was janitorial service. But the fuse was burning, and I'd already lined up the matchbox, gasoline, and fire extinguisher just far enough away that they'd never reach it in time. The conference room at Lenny's firm smelled like burnt coffee and laminated ambition, fake plants in every corner. One of those motivational posters that says success over a picture of a mountain climber about to die. Lenny sat across from me in a blue pinstripe suit that made him look like a nervous ventriloquist dummy. But his hands were steady as he slid the final lease transfer document across the table. All you got to do is sign right there under outgoing lessee, and again on page 4 under authorizing party. He hesitated, pen in hand. "You still good with this?" I looked down at the paper. Crisp, clinical, cold as Haley's smile. Incoming tenant, Bloom Pulse Incorporated. Effective date, August 31st, 12 p.m. Term, $12,800 divided by Mon Triple Net, 5-year contract. Signature line, Miranda Jean Harkins. I picked up the pen. "No second thoughts?" Lenny asked. "Only that I didn't do this sooner," I replied. The pen scraped across the page like a guillotine blade, and just like that, 21 years of institutional memory transferred to a corporate empire with a Pinterest mood board. Lenny sighed. "I'll submit this to the property manager this afternoon. Judge already approved the eviction. You'll get notice of posting within 48 hours. I raised an eyebrow. "They'll get 48 hours to vacate?" He nodded. From the moment the notice hits the door, no appeal, no wiggle room. They missed the renewal window, sublet illegally, and didn't respond to termination paperwork. You handed them the rope. They built the gallows. I left the office with a copy of the signed documents tucked neatly in a manila folder labeled closure. Not revenge, not get even, just closure. Because that's what this was now. A clean surgical ending to 2 decades of being invisible while holding up the ceiling. Later that evening, I got in my car and drove downtown. The city looked different at night, shinier, colder, like everything had been dipped in chrome and regret. I parked across the street from the building and killed the engine, left the headlights off, just watched. The lights were still on in the executive suites, probably burning through a few $1,000 in overtime pay and catered sushi. Haley was probably prepping another internal culture slideshow. The CEO was probably somewhere in the corner practicing his investor pitch in the mirror with a scotch in one hand and a lie in the other. I sipped my gas station coffee and rolled down the window. The building stood there, clueless, silent, lit up like Christmas Eve, and just as blind to what was coming. That same building that once felt like mine, now a stranger. I looked up at Suite 221, the corner office, my old desk, now occupied by some project manager who thinks HVAC stands for happy vibes and coffee. I smiled, not out of malice, not even joy. It was the smile of a woman watching a freight train inch toward a man who's too busy texting to hear it coming. They had no idea that tomorrow morning, the county marshal would be taping a fluorescent orange notice to their glass doors. That in 48 hours, every whiteboard brainstorm, every yoga ball chair, every beanbag in the innovation zone would be loaded into a moving truck, with Bloom Pulse waiting behind them, cash in hand, and incense ready. I sat there until the lights started to flicker off. Then I drove home, window down, wind in my hair, manila folder on the passenger seat, and a kind of peace I hadn't felt since 2003. Right around the time I learned that gratitude has an expiration date, but leverage stays fresh forever. The sterile silence of my apartment was a stark contrast to the manufactured drama of the conference room. It was a quiet so profound it felt like a held breath, a space where only the rustle of paper and the steady beat of my own pulse registered. The hot pink folder, once a symbol of my quiet diligence, now lay open on my kitchen table, its contents a meticulously organized arsenal. Each document was a carefully cataloged bullet, each email a coded message waiting to be deciphered. I had spent the last 7 years ensuring everything was documented, cross-referenced, and filed away. Backups of backups, stored not just digitally, but in my mind. The lease, of course, was the cornerstone, but beneath it lay a veritable ecosystem of operational interdependence. The HVAC maintenance logs, the vendor contracts for everything from toilet paper to the building's fire suppression system. The original utility accounts opened in my name because the company's credit was non-existent back in '05. They'd all been renewed, paid for, and managed by me, the ghost in the machine, the woman who ensured the lights stayed on and the plumbing didn't overflow. I wasn't sentimental, but I understood the power of ownership, of being the linchpin. When they dismissed me as a relic, a disposable cog, they'd forgotten that the machine was, in large part, mine. They'd taken my quiet competence for granted, mistaking my silence for a lack of agency. It was a fatal flaw. I meticulously organized scanned copies of every single maintenance request, every vendor invoice, every utility bill, dating back to my initial renegotiation of the lease in 2017, a detail they'd conveniently glossed over when they failed to trigger the renewal clause. Each file was clearly labeled, cross-referenced, and loaded onto a secured, encrypted USB drive. I even created a dummy document titled Building Systems Manual Master Copy, which, when opened, simply displayed a countdown timer and a sternly worded message: access denied. For unauthorized access, please contact legal. The next morning, the dawn broke not with birdsong, but with the insistent, jarring buzz of my phone. It was Dan, the head of facilities. Dan was one of the few good ones left, a man who understood the difference between a fuse and a fuse box, and who'd always treated me with a quiet respect. His texts were usually concise, factual. This was different. Miranda, is everything okay? The entire East Wing network is down. No internet, no internal servers. IT is in a total panic. They said it's like the whole server rack just powered down. No power surge, no trip breakers, just dead. My lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile. Dead. Yes, that was the word. The East Wing server rack drew its primary power from a dedicated line, a line I'd personally rerouted 7 years ago after a near-disastrous power fluctuation nearly wiped out our client database. It was a critical upgrade, one they deemed unnecessary expenditure at the time. I'd done it anyway, using my own funds, and documented the independent cabling with the city's electrical board under a utility account I controlled. Now, without my active monthly authorization code, which naturally I hadn't provided, the system had gracefully, precisely, and autonomously shut itself down. It was like pulling a single thread and watching the entire tapestry unravel. By midday, the texts from Dan were coming in faster, laced with a growing urgency. This is bad, Miranda. They can't get it back up. Says the system requires a primary key authentication that they don't have. IT guys are sweating through their expensive shirts. Heard someone mention a third-party vendor, but no one can find the contract. You wouldn't happen to know anything about a Phoenix protocol, would you? Phoenix Protocol, my little emergency shutdown sequence, tied to the building's independent backup generator and a private cloud server, which I also happen to own. Designed to safeguard critical infrastructure in case of exactly this. It was a contingency plan for contingencies, a contingency for when the primary contingency failed. I hadn't even bothered to explain it to them. Why would I? They saw me as the person who knew where the spare light bulbs were kept, not the architect of the company's digital lifeline. The panic was beginning to ripple outward. I could feel it, a subtle tremor in the digital ether. Old colleagues, the ones who'd been decent, started reaching out. Hey Miranda, hope you're doing okay. Heard about the network issues? Absolute chaos here. They're saying it's a major security breach or something. Some of the client portals are down too. Can you believe this? Another text, this one from Sarah in accounting, her usual cheerful tone replaced with a frantic edge. Miranda, seriously, is there any chance you have a spare admin password for the main server? They're talking about losing client data. The execs are losing their minds. Losing their minds. Good, let them experience a fraction of the anxiety they'd inflicted on me. I didn't reply. Each unanswered message was a small, cold stone dropped into their rapidly rising sea of panic. They were adrift, with no captain, no compass, and certainly no functioning navigation system. Then came the email, not directly from the CEO or HR, but a mass email, a pathetic attempt to rally the troops that only highlighted their cluelessness. Subject: urgent. All hands meeting. Critical infrastructure update. The body was a masterpiece of corporate jargon and desperate reassurances. Team, we are currently experiencing an unprecedented technical challenge impacting our core network infrastructure. Our IT department is working around the clock with external consultants to resolve the situation. We understand the concern this may cause, and we appreciate your patience and resilience. An emergency all-hands meeting will be held this afternoon at 3 p.m. in the main conference room. Your presence is mandatory. External consultants, bless their hearts. They were probably scratching their heads, flipping through manuals that didn't exist, trying to understand a system built by a phantom. I imagine them pacing the executive floor, their expensive suits looking rumpled, their buzzword-laden jargon falling flat against the stark reality of a silent, unresponsive server room. The real kicker came an hour later, a forwarded message from Lenny, my lawyer, with a succinct addition. For your information, incoming legal notice from property management. See attached. The attachment was a formal notice from Thomas, the property manager. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that the company was in default of its lease agreement. Failure to renew, failure to respond to communications regarding renewal, and clear evidence of unauthorized subletting. Bloom Pulse, the wellness startup I'd conveniently lined up, had already submitted their application for the premises. The notice demanded immediate vacation of the premises within 48 hours. I leaned back in my chair, a deep, satisfying sigh escaping my lips. They thought they were dealing with a minor IT glitch. They were about to discover that the entire building was about to become their problem. The silence from my end was my weapon. The lack of communication was my strategy. I hadn't acted to shut them down. I had simply stopped enabling them. The systems I had meticulously built and maintained, the ones they'd ignored and devalued, were now enforcing my will. The trap was sprung, not with a bang, but with a quiet, digital click. They had realized the server room was dead, the building was a liability, and that the woman they'd fired was the only one who held the keys to everything. But they still didn't know how much I held. Not yet. The silence that followed the initial panic lasted precisely 48 hours. 48 hours of frantic IT calls, of escalating reports to an increasingly bewildered executive team, and of increasingly desperate attempts to find the phantom vendor responsible for the Phoenix protocol. Then, the dam broke. My phone rang, the caller ID displaying an unfamiliar corporate number. I let it ring, enjoying the suspense. On the 7th ring, I answered, my voice calm and measured. Miranda Harkins speaking. A strained, raspy voice, unmistakably Nathan Altman, the CEO, sputtered on the other end. Miranda? Thank God. We need your help, urgently. The shift in tone was palpable, a stark contrast to the dismissive arrogance of our last encounter. It was the sound of a man teetering on the precipice, his carefully constructed corporate empire crumbling around him. My help? I echoed, taking a slow sip of my Earl Grey tea. I'm not sure I understand. I've returned all company property. Altman chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Yes, that's not why we're calling. It's about the building and the systems. Everything's just offline. We're getting notices from property management. 30 days to vacate. 30 days, Miranda. We're a public company. This is a disaster. He was practically hyperventilating now. The disaster he was referring to was the eviction notice, now firmly posted on the main office doors by a very official-looking county marshal that morning. My carefully crafted legal notices had done their work. The tenant was in breach, the lease was terminated, and the new tenants, Bloom Pulse, were set to move in within weeks. A disaster, I mused, letting the word hang in the air. Funny, I recall suggesting a security patch for our network infrastructure that was deemed too expensive a few years back, and a rather comprehensive building maintenance plan that was streamlined. He sputtered again, a strangled sound. That's not fair. We were restructuring, focusing on core competencies. Core competencies, I repeated, a faint smile touching my lips. My core competency was ensuring this company didn't collapse from its own incompetence. It appears that competency has expired. A heavy silence descended. Then, a different voice, colder, more professional, cut in. Miss Harkins, this is David Sterling, General Counsel for the company. Mr. Altman is understandably distressed. We need to understand your position regarding the lease agreement and the facility-wide shutdown. David Sterling, the man who drafted my severance package, his name now appearing on a different kind of official document. This was it, the moment of truth. Mr. Sterling, I began, my voice clear and steady. My position is simple. The company failed to renew its lease by the legally stipulated deadline. Furthermore, it has been found to be in breach of contract through unauthorized subletting and has failed to respond to all official notices regarding these violations. Regarding the facility shutdown, the systems you're experiencing failures with are powered by proprietary infrastructure that I personally installed, maintain, and control under separate, privately held service agreements. I paused, letting that sink in. Essentially, Mr. Sterling, you fired the person who held the operational keys to everything. The building, the power, the network, the data security. And you did it without understanding that I own those keys, not just by virtue of my employment, but by contract and by infrastructure. Sterling cleared his throat. Miss Harkins, we understand you feel you were wronged. However, this situation is untenable. The board is demanding solutions. We are prepared to discuss a resolution. You have two options. The words hung in the air, heavy with consequence. Two options. The careful preparation, the years of quiet competence, had led to this. Option A, Sterling continued, his voice carefully modulated, is a return to your former role. Facilities and operations manager with a significant salary increase. A substantial bonus for your immediate cooperation in restoring full operational capacity, and a public acknowledgement from the board of your critical contributions. We will also ensure the CEO and HR director who handled your termination are reassigned. This was the olive branch, the narrow escape hatch, a chance for them to recover, albeit with a severe blow to their ego and wallets. And option B, I prompted, already knowing the answer. Sterling took a deep breath. Option B is less palatable. We will proceed with the eviction. We will also initiate legal action for damages related to the loss of operational capacity, client data security breaches, and the subsequent impact on our share price and investor confidence. This could result in considerable financial penalties for you, Miss Harkins, based on the original lease terms and the penalties associated with contractual breaches. He was bluffing, of course. They knew they were in the wrong. Their leverage was as thin as a used napkin. I took another slow sip of tea. Mr. Sterling, Mr. Altman, I understand the gravity of your situation, and I appreciate you presenting the options. For option A, while tempting, the offer of reinstatement holds no appeal. My contribution was never about a title. It was about ensuring things worked. You have demonstrated a consistent inability to value that. Furthermore, the critical contributions you speak of were conveniently overlooked until now. Altman let out a choke sound. But the company, our reputation. Your reputation was damaged the moment you dismissed me without understanding my role, I stated calmly. As for the company's future, that is no longer my concern. So, option B at Island. Sterling's voice was tight. Miss Harkins, you cannot possibly intend to destroy us. I am not destroying anything, Mr. Sterling. I corrected, my voice gaining a steely edge. I am simply allowing the consequences of your own actions to unfold. You terminated my employment without cause. As per my employment contract, specifically Section 7, subsection C, which I believe my lawyer forwarded to you last week, any termination without cause initiates a clause wherein all company assets that I was instrumental in developing or maintaining revert to my ownership. This includes the proprietary network infrastructure I implemented, the building's independent power systems, and naturally, the original lease agreement, which, as you are aware, is still legally under my name as the primary guarantor for my previous tenure as facilities manager. I let that sink in. The data breach they'd conveniently labeled unforeseeable was a direct result of their refusal to invest in the security upgrades I'd proposed. And those upgrades? They were running on systems I owned. Furthermore, I continued, the subletting clause in the lease, which you failed to disclose and which was clearly violated, gives me the right to terminate the lease immediately and seek damages for lost revenue. Bloom Pulse has already wired the first 2 months' rent to an account under my name, as per our private agreement. They're eager to move in. A strangled gasp from Altman. Sterling was silent, probably scrambling to find his own legal documents, his carefully constructed composure crumbling. So, Mr. Sterling, I concluded, my voice a low, firm tone. To be clear, option A is rejected. For option B, I will not be initiating legal action for damages. I will also refrain from releasing the evidence of the company's consistent failure to adhere to basic security protocols, which would likely trigger regulatory investigations and significant fines. However, as the sole legal tenant of the building, and as the owner of the infrastructure that currently powers it, I will be exercising my right to terminate your occupancy, effective immediately. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises, and all equipment and data currently housed within will be considered abandoned property, subject to salvage and disposal by myself. Bloom Pulse is scheduled to begin their move-in process in 48 hours. The building's power will be fully disconnected from your systems at that time, and the network will be permanently inaccessible. I suggest you start packing. The line went dead. Altman had hung up. Sterling, I imagined, was staring at his own contract, the one that had so clearly detailed my ownership of the very systems he was trying to protect. The following days were a symphony of quiet chaos. Whispers turned into frantic shouts. Reports filtered back to me from former colleagues, IT teams dismantling server racks in a panic, the executive team huddled in meetings, their faces pale and drawn. The unforeseeable data breach had, of course, been compounded by the fact that their primary network was now offline, cutting off access to cloud backups and internal client databases. The financial repercussions were immediate and brutal. News of the eviction, the infrastructure collapse, and the potential data exposure sent their stock plummeting. The press, sensing blood in the water, circled like sharks. I spent my days in blissful quietude, enjoying my newfound freedom and the satisfaction of a plan meticulously executed. I received a polite email from Bloom Pulse confirming their move-in date and thanking me for the seamless transition. They'd even sent a small, tasteful gift basket filled with organic teas and artisanal chocolates, a far cry from the hollow platitudes I'd endured for years. On the third day after my final call, I received a single, official-looking letter. It wasn't from Altman or Sterling, but from the board of directors. It was terse, professional, and devoid of emotion. It simply stated that my employment had been terminated due to restructuring, effective immediately, and that my severance package, including a substantial financial settlement and stock options, would be processed within 24 hours. A wry smile played on my lips. They were trying to save face, to present it as a mutually agreed-upon separation, a clean break. They were still trying to control the narrative, even in defeat. The stock options were a laughably small attempt to buy my silence. I'd already acquired far more than they could ever compensate for. The next morning, I watched from my window as the moving trucks began to arrive at the old office building, not for Bloom Pulse, but for the company I had once served. Their belongings, their equipment, their legacy, all being unceremoniously hauled out. The CEO, Altman, was reportedly seen arguing with the movers, his face a mask of impotent rage, while a lone security guard stood impassively by. The story hit the business news that afternoon. Tech giant evicted amidst unforeseen infrastructure collapse and data breach scandal. The article detailed the company's rapid descent from a rising star to a corporate pariah, all attributed to gross mismanagement and a catastrophic failure to address critical infrastructure vulnerabilities. My name was never mentioned, of course. My revenge was a quiet one, a whisper in the annals of corporate history, a cautionary tale of the invisible hand that truly runs the machine. I poured myself a glass of wine, the kind that cost more than a week's worth of my old groceries, and raised it in a silent toast to the power of documentation, to the quiet competence that outlasts arrogant ambition, to the forgotten clauses, the overlooked infrastructure, and the woman who knew when to stop enabling the incompetence of others. The company and its ego were left to crumble. I, on the other hand, was just getting started. And to all of you legends who made it this far, if watching the mighty fall to the quiet strength of meticulous planning tickles your funny bone, hit that like button and subscribe. We've got more tales of corporate karma brewing. Let's make sure those who underestimate the quiet ones get a taste of their own medicine. After all, some debts are paid, not with money, but with precision.